Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. It would appear that right hook Roxy, Yana Verdusco, will be returning to action April 19th in Commerce, California, against an opponent that has yet to be announced as part of a 360 Promotions show. 360 Promotions, that's Tom Loeffler. That's the same Tom Loeffler that used to promote Gennady Golovkin. He now promotes Yana Verdusco, and he still does a series of shows on the West Coast, broadcasted by UFC Fight Pass. In connection with Dana White, at only 3-0, I don't expect that Yana Verdusco is going to take on somebody difficult or dangerous. The fights that a fighter has at this early stage in their career are developmental fights. What's interesting is that this is being billed as a featherweight contest, scheduled for 6 rounds in the featherweight division, as opposed to Iyana's last fight that was at super feather, where Alicia Baumgartner still reigns as that division's undisputed champion. Would appear that they are moving young Yana Verdusco down to 126 pounds. So maybe what they figure is that procuring an alphabet title in the featherweight division might be easier than procuring one at super featherweight. But at only 3-0, isn't it a bit early to be worrying about alphabet titles and where is best to pick one up? Yana recorded her very first knockout in her last fight. Is it not a bit early to be worrying about stuff like that? And maybe what they figure is that the champions at featherweight are more beatable, or it's a more vibrant weight class. There's more going on there. There are bigger names, bigger fights. Sky Nicholson just so happens to campaign there, and she's buzzing right now, making a lot of press. Of course, Amandia Serrano, the woman to beat at that weight, while I don't think Yana means to fight her, get her in the ring, what she can do is get some spillover for campaigning at the same weight as some of these big names. Amanda Serrano, Sky Nicholson. Could be the rationale, and landing with more authority. Yana Verdusco recorded her very first knockout as a professional in her last fight. That was at super featherweight. She might be able to rack up even more knockouts as a featherweight, landing with more authority. And because she's young, because she's only 23 years old, she can likely get down there, make it match fit, and be ready to fight. We don't know who she's fighting, but like I said, at 3-0, I don't expect that they would have matched her against anybody too difficult or too dangerous. The fights a fighter has at this stage in their career are developmental fights. It's just about getting experience. So we can look forward to the ring return of Right Hook Roxy in April, and we'll talk more about the fight as the fight date approaches.
Many consider you the biggest, hardest puncher, in all of boxing in regards to where you're at in your weight class and how you consistently are just knocking guys out. What's that feeling like when you do?
It actually feel like a home run, like when someone hit the bat and it just right on the target and it go far. It's just like that. So that's how I feel when you actually hit somebody on the button and you know that you catch them real good. So that's how I feel for me.
Now, going into this fight against Lamont Roach, this is your first fight for 2025. What are you hoping to accomplish this year in 2025? And it all begins this Saturday against Lamont Roach.
Stay in the ring more this year, for sure. I probably got, I want to say, hopefully I got 3 fights this year, hopefully. But I'm looking forward to Lamont Roach come March the 1st, and we'll figure out after that.
Is it my imagination, or did Gervonta Davis seem a bit dejected, disinterested at the presser today at Gleason's? According to veteran boxing scribe Marcos Villegas, he didn't even bother to work out. It was an open workout, except he didn't work out. All he reiterated is that he hopes to fight 3 times this year, and the Lamont Roach fight will be the first fight of it. He didn't seem too excited. But why would he be? It's another foregone conclusion fight on paper. Fighting Lamont Roach, a super featherweight moving up in weight to lightweight, when his claim to fame is fighting the same Hector Luis Garcia that Gervonta fought after Gervonta fought him, after Gervonta knocked him out. Needless to say that this weekend's card really doesn't have the big fight feel. Now, there are some that are excited, though I wouldn't say it's the boxing that has them excited.
Then what?
Gervonta Davis, via his own social media, said, "I can't wait for y'all to see my new muscles," to which Eli Too Real responded,
I can't wait to see the muscles, champ.
"I've long maintained that Gervonta Davis's core supporters and their fixation with him has very little to do with boxing. This guy wants to see his muscles. Boxing Shigo is marveling over his braids and his leg tattoos. It's not pugilism these guys are interested in."
I think that's a little weird, you know what I'm saying? Be with your trainer, your lifetime, your career trainer, and to to not have him as your head trainer in the corner. So that might be a difference maker for him. You never know. I think me personally, as a boxing fan, I think Calvin fits him the best. Knowing boxing inside and out, I think Calvin fits him the best. So, who knows?
That is Lamont Roach addressing recent rumors that Calvin Ford didn't actually help Gervonta Davis prepare for this weekend's fight. And these rumors have been around for some weeks, that there is dissension in the ranks, that Gervonta's not getting along with Calvin Ford or something to that effect. I really don't know. I came across those rumors, but I didn't know what to make of them because I didn't know where they were coming from. But they're getting around, at least enough that Lamont Roach addressed them. If we are to entertain this rumor that Calvin didn't actually train him for the fight, I think that's a first, because it's my understanding that Calvin Ford has been training Gervonta Davis since his days as an amateur. He's been there from the very beginning. This is his career-long trainer. And if he's not there now, what effect could that have on Gervonta the night of, if you didn't even bother to devise a plan for Lamont Roach? Are you looking past him? You know, for Lamont Roach, this is the biggest fight of his career. The kind of fight that he gets out of bed for, whereas for Gervonta, he just seems sort of disinterested, dejected. So Calvin Ford didn't actually train him? Does he even have a game plan for Lamont Roach?
Now, we spoke to Roach earlier today at the open workout. You know, we've seen you both go back and forth online, and he was saying, Tank likes to troll people, especially going into a fight. And he's like, I like to troll back. What is he in for this Saturday night?
Yeah, a ruler weekend. A ruler weekend for sure. He just doing what he have to do, trying to psych himself out for the fight and things like that. But come off the fridge, it's all about skill versus skill. And who had the better skill that night is going to be the victorious person.
Is it my imagination, or does Gervonta Davis just not seem into it? I mean, the guy doing the interview seems more excited than he does. But he's the one that's going to be fighting. So when you're not challenging yourself by facing the best and brightest fighters out there, when you're not testing yourself, when you don't have that to motivate you, maybe it's hard to stay interested. Gervonta Davis don't got no illusions about what kind of guy he's fighting or why they picked him. I don't think that for Gervonta Davis, this has the big fight feel. The only semblance of the big fight feel he may have felt was the Ryan Garcia fight, because that was a big fight, but even that was a fight where he was heavily favored to win. That he won't go into this weekend's fight the way that Usyk felt going into the Fury fight, or the Joshua fight, how Crawford felt going into the Spence fight, or how Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather may have felt finally facing each other. The big fight feel, the nerves, the jitters, and the desire to be the best, to prove it. Gervonta Davis doesn't want to prove it. And when you don't have that, it's kind of hard to stay motivated, ain't it? It's kind of hard to stay interested. You're just kind of going through the motions and saying things people expect you to say, except going through the motions in this profession is actually quite dangerous when you don't really want to be there, but the other guy does. No matter what people think of you and what people's perceptions of you are, upsets do happen. Should we expect one to happen this weekend? I wouldn't bet on it. No. I mean, Gervonta Davis didn't land on this guy for no reason. They pick his opponents quite carefully. He should win. But man alive if he doesn't. He's all the PBC really has. It's down to Gervonta Davis and David Benavidez as their flagship fighters. Wilder's career is all but over, and so is Errol Spence Jr.'s. What other fighters remain at the PBC? A good portion of them are being outsourced, rented to other promoters who can find use for them more than the PBC, since they're not doing anywhere near as many shows as they used to. They don't have the money. Right. And in terms of quote-unquote big draws and marquee fighters, they are really down to just two, just David Benavidez and Gervonta Davis, so that if something were to happen to one of them, say Gervonta this weekend, that would be catastrophic for the PBC, for their fan base, and what content creators rely on Gervonta Davis videos, talking up Gervonta Davis, talking about Gervonta Davis to keep their metrics up. He's quite popular online, where you don't have to pay to see him, where you don't have to pay to talk about him, to pay per view. I remember when Deontay Wilder lost to Tyson Fury, not once but twice, there were entire channels, content creators, that walked away from covering boxing altogether because they relied on Wilder videos, making videos about Wilder to keep the views up. Was more of the same when Terrence Crawford beat the brakes off of Errol Spence. Content creators, there were some that just disappeared because they relied on making Spence videos to drum up business. So if Gervonta were to lose, yikes, that would be a critical hit for what remains of the PBC fan base and what remains of the PBC stable. If Gervonta Davis were to lose.
You want to make any comment on what happened with you and Benavidez Sr.?
Nah, man. I lost all respect for that guy, so,
Rayo, when we talked to you in our live, in our Fight Hub Live chat, we said there's numerous fights for you and continue for your career. What are the big names that you're still searching for? You're coming off a huge win with Pitbull Cruz, but what are the names out there you're still looking for?
I want a big fight. I want like a Tank if he's down to move up to 140, or Teofimo Lopez at 140. Devin, Ryan, I want to get in there with those guys.
He said he lost all respect for Jose Benavidez Sr., who used to train him. He has since parted ways with him and enlisted the aid of veteran trainer Robert Garcia, what I consider to be an upgrade. But we still don't know why they separated. We still don't know what the rift was between Rayo and Jose and what led him to leave that gym. And because we don't actually know what the problem was, you have to wonder if the same thing won't happen with some other fighters that Jose might be training, like Diego Pacheco. How long before he loses all respect for Jose, like Rayo lost all respect for Jose, who mentioned a lot of potential names, a lot of potential fights. If he takes care of business this weekend, I think he's going to lose. I think Gary Antoine Russell is going to stop him. I think that beating Isaac Cruz for the WBA title is a nice feather in Rayo's cap, but now he's facing a bona fide 140, a legit 140, not a little guy who moved up in weight. And while I don't think Gary Antoine Russell is the best in show at 140, does he need to be to beat Rayo? No. Edwin De Los Santos beat Rayo. It's not outside the realm of possibility that Gary Antoine Russell is going to beat Rayo. But for argument's sake, for conversation, let's say he doesn't. Let's say Rayo wins, stays WBA champion. What then? Well, he mentioned a lot of names, a lot of potentials, but you will notice that he's been strategically positioned as the co-main event of a show that Gervonta is headlining. So I would assume that if Rayo wins this weekend and Gervonta wins this weekend, maybe Gervonta's next fight will be Rayo at 140. And if Gary wins? I don't think Gervonta Davis will fight Gary Antoine Russell. In a scenario like that, I would sooner expect Gervonta to fight Isaac Cruz again, who's coming off a win over Angel Fierro. He'll fight him. He did say he wants to fight 3 times this year. First fight could be Lamont Roach, the second fight could be Isaac, and if there's time, he might squeeze in a third, a farewell fight, because he did say he wants to retire this year. We'll see what happens after this weekend.
That he had injured his rib. Either he had messed up the cartilage or he had actually had a microfracture in that rib in sparring. And after that, he wasn't able to spar for a while. Now, what is the connection? The investigation of the sources that I'm looking at have said, without specifically talking about Errol Spence, that one of the things that they have had complaints with from the people that they have spoken to throughout boxing is that oftentimes people fix sparring matches by loading their gloves.
This kind of content is what I meant when I said that there are some content creators that are very top-heavy when it comes to PBC and PBC fighters, and for them, that's their main source of income. In this video, Fanon, one of the bigger channels in the YTBC, he's been around a while, does very good metrics. Or he has. You know that he's still making Errol Spence Jr. videos. That's what he's talking about, that someone may have allegedly hurt Errol Spence Jr. in sparring en route to the Terence Crawford fight. And I believe that the video is titled, "The Federal Bureau of Investigations is now investigating Terence Crawford."
What?
I know, I mean, enough of this content, and you're not talking about boxing anymore. You're not covering the sport of boxing. It just goes way left. There is no credible news source, emphasis on credible, reporting an investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigations into fixed sparring sessions, investigating Terence Crawford in association with them. Nobody is reporting that. He made it up. He made the whole thing up, just like when he made up that story about Amazon Prime offering Gervonta Davis $500 million. So bullshit. But when your audience is comprised of mostly non-boxing fans, just a bunch of morons looking for something to listen to, a cool story, it doesn't matter if it's true or not. But even they lose interest after a while. It's a wonder anybody's even still talking about Errol Spence Jr. when it's painfully obvious to the people in boxing he's done. It's over. If he were going to come back, he would have come back by now. If he were going to come back, he would have hired a new trainer to replace Derek James, which he still hasn't. It's getting closer to 2 years out from the Terence Crawford fight that finished him. It's closer to 2. And the longer it takes him to come back, the more difficult it will be if he ever does decide to come back. So that if you've been relying on making videos about Spence and other fighters like him, other fighters at the PBC, you're gonna run out of stuff to talk about, at which point you have to start making things up. Neither Fanon or the audience that he panders to care about actual boxing and world boxing. Nope. It's a niche audience that's very specific about who and what they're interested in. My advice? You better start covering a different sport. Or maybe get into politics. Because if the PBC has been the anchor for the kind of content that you upload, you may not have them to talk about much longer. The boxing landscape is changing, and with it the axis of power. What shows are actually moving the needle? What are people actually talking about without content creators trying to force it, regurgitating the same old subjects about the same old fighters? It's yesterday's news. Spence is done. I don't even wish that upon him, but it's reality. It's obvious. So many of the fighters that content creators, just like Fanon, put on a pedestal ended up crashing and burning. And because you've been catering to a niche audience, it's much harder for you to adapt, since the audience that frequents your channel, they're not really boxing fans. So just covering boxing, it won't cut it. Not to maintain. The only hope is that somebody here stateside will create enough waves that you can transition to talking about them.